It is such an honor today to have Steve Walsh on the podcast. Steve is more than an entrepreneur or venture capital investor. He is a force that redefines the boundaries of what is possible. With over 30 years of financial and investment expertise, Steve has crafted a career of bold decisions and innovative strategies. His journey, which includes successfully navigating the turbulent waters of risk and reward, ultimately led him to establish Bison Equity Group, a venture capital firm committed to empowering entrepreneurs. Steve's influence extends far beyond his professional achievements. He is an inspiring figure whose zone of genius has always been in helping others see a bigger vision for what's possible, embracing their higher potential, and making their own leap toward success. Now, through his book, Make the 10X Leap, Steve continues his mission to help entrepreneurs see their company's scalability factor while also guiding them through what it takes to get it done. Steve, I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for being on the show.
Hey, William, thanks a lot. It's a great pleasure to be on this. We have talked before and we've had some great talks and I'm looking forward to this.
Welcome to Catalytic Leadership, the podcast designed to help leaders intentionally grow and thrive. Here is your host, author and leadership and executive coach, Dr. William Attaway.
I'd love to start with you sharing a little bit of your story with our listeners. I had a few of the high points, but I'd love to hear particularly about your journey and your development as a leader. How'd you get started?
So, I kind of go back to when I was a farm boy. I grew up on a farm, and one of the things I learned right away is when I was in school, a lot of the things that I needed to learn to become better. And that's been always my strive is to become better for where can I be? And that's always brought me from high school, college to now. And that was, I got my CPA. I think that was probably one of the high points. One of the many in high school or in college. And then from there, it's a matter of I became an investor. And one of the things I was seeing a lot of was leadership. Leadership is probably the most important thing in anything you do. I don't care if you're in relationships or just in a business. Leadership is super important. And quite frankly, it's a matter of it's a learning. You have to have that learning mindset to really do that. And so I've always worked with, and I go back to this too, is mentors and coaches.
Yeah.
So a lot of times entrepreneurs struggle with, and this is where I sometimes struggle. They don't see, the things that maybe that they're missing. Their employees will, but a lot of times they don't notice it. They don't see it. And so it's good to have that coach, and it's good to have those mentors to say, hey, work on, maybe this is what you really need to work on that part of it, the skill is leadership is always been important for me. And how do I become a better leader? And that's either reading books, listening podcasts like yours, things like that really can get me to the next level. And then so I can bring that to a lot of the entrepreneurs, because a lot of entrepreneurs, they have one problem a lot of times, and that's the ego. And the ego is, you run across that.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk about coaches and mentors, and I think there's such a value in having people in your life who have an outside perspective, who help you see what you can't see, help you see your blind spots, and help you overcome those. Has that always been something you valued, or was there a point at which you discovered, oh, wow, this is really important?
The thing is, really, when I was I think in college, I didn't really know it was a mentor or it was somebody like a coach. But I would gravitate to professors that would give me guidance. I would gravitate towards them, and it was always the ones that the hardest ones were the ones that you remember the most.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that gave you the most guidance. I didn't think of it at the time as a mentor or as a coach, but that's what they were. And along the way, even with working with different companies, when I went from that into accounting, and I decided that wasn't really where I wanted to go. But it really, I always attracted somebody that was a coach or leader that was a lot better than me. That was in, and that was the one thing that I noticed. I didn't know how important it was until I really got into business on myself, and how important it was to bring somebody in that has done actually, and it didn't have to be in my industry, but it had to be somebody that was doing something better than me. That, and the leadership was, I think that was the one thing that I would always gravitate towards. But like you said, I never thought of it before until I really got into business on my own, how important it was to have a mentor. And so that's where I work with, one of the first things I do when I look at companies is, how's the leader leading? You know,
Yeah.
are they leading? Are they letting their employees make decisions on for themselves? The one thing I always say is that if you're always having the employee, um, if they fail and you're always, driving where they're like, hey, this is something that it's a learning, you have to have that learning mindset to decide, okay, you failed here. Okay, what did you learn? And now let's go and look at that a little bit different next time, so that next time you don't do that same thing. And I look at it as I've had some really good experiences and really bad experiences, and I always look at the bad experiences are the ones that I learned the most.
Yeah. Well, there's no wasted experience, right? I mean, the truth is you can learn from any experience in your life. It's either there for your learning, for your benefit, or so that you can help somebody else. And that's one thing I see in your journey as you've described it. You have learned these lessons through your own business experience. And now you're beginning to share, or maybe you always have, but you're being very intentional about sharing what you've learned for the benefit of other people. Is that what drove you to Make the 10X Leap?
Yeah, because I was seeing the same problems over and over again with the entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs were, the one thing is a lot of times they become comfortable,
Yeah.
or tell themselves, hey, we can't do it. Our company's different, our industry is different. It just doesn't work that way, and they become comfortable, but they're comfortable in a not so great way because they're putting in not 50 hours a week, they're putting in 80 hours a week, or they're doing things that really not moving to the next level. And so all that stuff that they're doing, that was really where I started with the book, is because they were doing a lot of those things, not doing the things that they enjoyed, meaning getting home for their dinner for their family, traveling, things like that. So I was seeing a lot of that with the business owners. And this is really where I came down to is with the book, it gives them a roadmap for, hey, there is a better way. And that better way is to do things that they would normally not do. Being comfortable is not good. I always say is that if you're comfortable, it's probably you need to go to the next level. And quite frankly, the next level is not as hard as you think. It's a matter of the mindset. It always comes down to the mindset first. And you probably have worked with that many a times, with getting their mindset on it's possible. I always go back to, where do we want to go? Where is it that you really want to go? And then work backwards from there.
I love that. Well, if you don't have a clear destination in mind, how can you build a bridge from where you are to where you want to be? How
Right.
can you be intentional in that? And that is something that I've worked with so many clients through, around mindset, around leadership, trying to help them understand that you are the hardest person you will ever lead. You have to have clarity. not only to be able to communicate with your team, with other people, and with potential investors, but you have to have clarity, most importantly, for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you grow that intentionality over time. And that's one thing I love about your message and what you're sharing, is that you see the value not only in the actions, but in the mindset that drives them.
Yeah, like we have talked, the mindset starts with that. The ego is probably one of the hardest things to leave leave, at the front door.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, your employees will see it. They will. A lot of times, owners feel that they're going to hide some of the things from their employees. They see it. They see it. I mean, they know. They see the areas that they should be stronger in, things like that. I mean, I love working with entrepreneurs that have a growth mindset,
Yeah.
that understand that, hey, they don't have all the answers. So,
Yes.
that's the one thing is, and work with their employees to build a culture that is fun. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
it comes down to.
Well, it's true. You talk about being comfortable and the danger in that. I often say that growth and comfort cannot coexist, right?
Mhm.
You pick one. If you want to be
Right.
comfortable, you're not going to grow. If you want to grow, you're not going to be comfortable.
Right.
And what you're describing here about that growth mindset is that is a choice that you make daily. This is not a one and done. This is something that you choose. And I know, like, the entrepreneurs who are reading your book and who are listening to what you're saying, they're going to be challenged by this, because that type of a daily choice, that type of a daily habit to choose that mindset, to choose that path, some days that's easier than others.
It starts at the beginning of the morning, and for myself, it's the rituals you start in the morning.
Yeah.
How do you start your morning? You get up in the morning. What do you do to get your mind moving forward? And that's where I think health is really important.
Yes.
And I think mind, body, and soul. And I look at that as, how can you go to the gym, work out, hit that, read. I think reading is really
Yep.
important, even
Yep.
if it's 15 minutes. I'm a big person when it comes to meditation. I think that really works, for me at least.
Mhm.
Uh, and it works with a lot of entrepreneurs. They always say to me is, I can't do that. Well, can you do it for a minute? Maybe a minute. Try a minute and then work off of that. But
Right.
go to the gym. And it really starts with some of those things. Where I look at is those days that you really don't want to go to the gym, that are just, those are the days that you need to go to the gym.
That's right. That's right.
You
But
know, go ahead, go ahead.
I was going to say, don't, you talk about, I can't do that. I can't do that. And don't let what you can't do stop you from doing what you can.
Right.
Step into what you can do. And I love that, what you just said. Can you do a minute?
Yeah.
Of course you can. Of course you can do a minute. Start where you are, not where you think you should be.
Right. Yeah. And that's where I start with the habits in the morning. Start with the morning habits, and then the rest of the day becomes easier. It's so much easier because your mind is clear. You're working off of things. I I have other things too that I work off of that I believe are really good habits. I see a lot of entrepreneurs, they get distracted and they're doing 10 different things, trying to do 10 different things,
Yeah.
and they're working off of, they're on the phone, they're doing all these things. And I try to get them to say, okay, let's break it down, and let's, instead of doing 10 different things, let's just do maybe one or two.
Yeah.
I go, my thing is, a lot of people wear an iWatch, an Apple Watch,
Yep.
and I suggest get rid of it. And the
Oh,
reason why is this: because it always is going to ring. It's always going to die. You're going to see the phones when you're in a meeting.
yeah.
Guess what? You're distracted by looking at your watch.
Oh, so good.
You're not listening to some of the things that maybe are going on in the meeting.
Wow.
So, that's what I do personally myself. And
Yeah.
so, distractions really slow the person down going for the day. And that's where I work off of that from there.
I think there's so much value in what you're saying there, Steve. I think that the distractions that we allow into our lives affect our productivity in a much greater way than we think they do. And you're right. This watch that I wear, it's great for step count. It's great for when you're exercising, tracking workouts, all these things. But those notifications, if you don't learn how to silence the notifications when you need to, then you will constantly be having your attention broken. You'll constantly be having your focus broken. And that doesn't help anybody.
No, it doesn't. And so they're, just the habits like that. And then getting back to, okay, now are they ready to scale? Do we want to scale this company? Are you really, I always say this, every small company doesn't have to be small. That's a choice. And so I look at it as you can always grow a company. It's just a matter of how far and how fast you want to go. Who do you want to bring in? It's, entrepreneurs always say, I can't do it. I'm the best person for this. Well, I tell you what, you can find somebody that's probably better than them to take over some of the chores that they've been doing.
Yeah.
And so it's a matter of working off of that. If we're going to scale this company, we're going to need new people. We're going to need probably we're going to need systems for sure. And then we may have capital, but we need to bring in capital. And that capital is depending on what they want, what type of capital they want. And that's where I will bring in capital for them. But it does start with that mindset first. I mean, if they bring in capital, it can be the worst thing they do is bring in capital, because all of a sudden they have to start spending it and they have no idea, no plan to spend it. If you go on my website at Bison Equity Group, I have some free resources on there for that. You can look at for like a plan, putting together an investment plan for you. That's kind of an idea. And then other resources, my book is on there too, things like that. But it does come with, we start with always the mindset.
Yeah. I think that a lot of the entrepreneurs who are listening want to grow, want to scale, want to get to a point, even for a successful exit at some point in the future.
Right.
And so many of them are not thinking about capital. They're not thinking about being investor ready. Like if you were sitting across a table with them, why would you say that's so important? Why would you say capital can make such a significant difference?
Oh, it's a matter of if they're at point A and they want to go to point B, that capital can be the fuel. I mean, it can be you can really generate a lot of growth, but it has to be smart. You have to use that capital smart. I see sometimes this happens. Entrepreneurs see these shiny objects.
Yes.
You've seen it. I mean,
Oh yeah.
and they think I can do, let's see, I want to put money this way because I think I've seen people make money this direction.
Right.
And quite frankly, that doesn't always work. It may not work for your company. I always say there's two things that you really look at is innovation and marketing. Those are two really important things to have. And the marketing is usually what they struggle with. They get the innovation side. You have a really good product or service, but it's the marketing that they struggle with.
Yeah.
And so how do we get in front of that existing customer? We stay in front of that. And how do we get into new customers? And so that's where that money, the capital will probably come into play, is we're going to keep on innovating and we're going to keep on marketing. Those are so I look at is and that's where you can go from, I would say a motorcycle to a rocket ship pretty fast.
Wow. That sounds appealing. And I know there's a lot of steps to get there. Like what are the things that entrepreneurs often don't think about when they're starting to move into that stage, when they want to be investor ready?
Well, I think a lot of it's to do with where they want to be. Where do they want to go? The investor ready. I always say, like we had talked about, is if you're, let's say at 10 million, you want to be at 100 million, and that's where you want to go. Well, work backwards. And then what do I need to do to get there? Do I have to get new people, new systems in place? Do I have to get in, um, marketing? What's my marketing plan? The thing is, each area you have to look at and see is where are we weak in? The marketing's usually one of the number one things. They typically say, well, I got a great product, everybody should buy it. Well, that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. And then from there, it's a matter of how can I make reoccurring revenue? I love reoccurring revenue, and there's all sorts of ways to do reoccurring revenue that a lot of times they don't even think about that potentially take their I would say that recurring revenue could be the one that keeps the lights on. And then everything above that is, we're going to be selling our products, things like that. But you always have to think about your customer. How, that customer is, if I'm selling them one widget, what is the other widget that I should be selling them? Or what is the one service I should be selling them? What am I doing that I'm not doing for them? But it's always comes down to that customer. I think is what's the problem that I'm solving now? Am I solving it completely for them?
That's good. That's really good. And I think that clarity is helpful, wherever you are in the journey, but particularly as you begin to move toward that. I love that mindset.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's, that mindset it's something that I've always looked at when it comes down to, there's some great marketing guys out there that's what they work off of that. And then also too is, I think is how do you want to look to your customer? The customer, do you want to become just selling one thing at a time with them, a transaction, or do you actually want to be true partner with them?
That's good.
And I think that's the most important thing. The relationship you have with the customer, and it's becoming more and more important now than ever. When you look at AI and how AI is doing, the relationship you have with the customer is going to become so much more important.
That's
The
true.
one-on-one relationship. And so if they don't see it that way, you're just a commodity. And so that and so that's where I look at it is how do we get them to look at it a little bit differently?
You're telling a story, I mean, you're communicating a narrative. And I know that that's an element when you're, looking at investors, when you're talking about capital. The storytelling plays a role in that. And I think you have to think about that in terms of your business. How can you be intentional as an entrepreneur in creating a narrative that is actually going to resonate with the customers, but also with the investors?
I think it starts with really knowing your customer. You really have to know your customer. What is your customer, that and that's where I've seen where companies have looked at and they're actually marketing to the wrong customer. That sometimes it's the one where they should be marketing to the wife versus the husband. It's product, and they actually should be marketing to the wife versus the husband. And so you got to look at it as, do they truly know their customer, and then are they really connected? That's where you bring your customer into your story, and that's that journey with them becomes, because it really becomes sticky then. If they're looking at it as a product, if there's two, I always look at it as if there's two different products on Amazon, which one are you going to do? Which one are you going to buy? And that's where I look at it is if you can have some connection with, and then it brings in also all the other people on top of that, that, they'll bring in their friends, they'll bring in then you can get new customers a lot easier that way.
That's good. Steve, you have to lead at a higher level today than you did 5 years ago in your business.
Right.
And that same thing is going to be true 5 years from now. How do you stay on top of your game? How do you level up with the new leadership skills that your team and your clients and your business are going to need you to have in the days ahead?
Well, I think that's the one thing I work off of. I always, obviously look at what am I doing in the morning when I start,
Mhm.
but also too is who am I using for a coach? Do I have a
Mm,
coach?
that's good.
I always look at, I don't care what I'm involved in, either health, um, it's things like that, or business.
Yeah.
I always try to find somebody that's better than me and work with the coach. Coaches are, they people think, well, do I really need one? Uh,
Mm,
you you can't avoid. I mean, you can't afford not to have one. I mean, it
yeah.
comes down to it.
Yeah.
And so that's where, for me to level up, every time I level up, I get probably a higher end coach
Mhm.
than that before. And for me, it's intention. What am I doing right now that I need to improve down the road? And that
Mm,
is, and it doesn't, and it's for me personally, I look at it as I look at, and entrepreneurs are a lot of ways the same as, um, if I want to be better and if I want to see my entrepreneurs that I'm working with be better, then I better scale up. I better do the things that I'm doing at a higher level. You
mhm.
know,
Yes.
I- it's amazing where you look at your. I was looking with my. I have a coach for working out, and he said to me one day, he said, "Steve, if you want to level up, you got to change your eating habits, things
Mhm.
like that."
Yeah.
And he said that you have to think of it so much more intentionally now than ever before. And so
Mm,
he was,
that's good.
and so that's where it comes into business too. Same way.
Yeah.
My business coach, same thing. He is all about talking about, okay, if you want to get to the next level, this is what we need to do.
That's so good. This is exactly why I've had coaches for decades in different areas for different things, because I want to be intentional in my growth. And I love that that is your rhythm, that that's your habit. I think that is why you have gone farther and have gotten there faster than so many others, because you have taken that effort and that intentionality.
Yeah, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they always look at costs sometimes.
Mhm.
And I always say that, you can't not afford it.
Yeah.
That's the one thing. And that's where it comes down to too, is when they want to scale, a lot of times they're afraid of bringing new people in because of that,
Yeah.
that we can't afford it. But quite frankly, if you took yourself out of that, whatever you're doing,
Mhm.
out and having somebody do that for you, guess
Yeah.
what? You're all of a sudden you're thinking about other things, about
That's
how
right.
you scale your company so much faster.
That's so true. You are in a continual learning mode. That is the posture that you live in. And I'm curious, is there a book that has made a big difference in your journey that you would recommend to the leaders who are listening?
It's fun. I think personally, there's so many books that I've read that I think of. Um, yeah, I go back to like Think and Grow Rich is a good
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
That was probably one of the ones that I looked at. And I go back to personally on spiritual level. I go back to this Superior Man. There's a
Mhm.
great book on that. It's interesting. Some of the books I've read have gotten me to the next level, and some of the things I've done have gotten me to the next level. I did this a retreat that it was a 12-day journey where you basically are up in the mountains 4 of those days without any any food, just water, and without cell phone, computer, all the stuff that you need to get away from. And it really opens you up to what are the things that I'm working on right now that I need to be s- stepping up to the next level. It
Mhm.
really gets you thinking about things that you probably didn't think about before because you're too distracted.
Mhm.
So those are the things that I look at. But the books I go to, that's I would say Think and Grow Rich. Going after that one would be the first one that I've always started with, and then there's so many other ones. 2.0. There's book out that's really good about talking about how to scale companies and really get to the next level. I would say if you're looking, for Michael Burke, he has some really good books on Prey Drive, how to get, if you're comfortable, how you can get your next level. And that's what I would look at all the time.
So good. Steve, this has been so helpful, I know, for so many of our listeners. And I know they're going to want to stay connected to you and continue to learn more from you and about what you're doing and check out your book. What's the best way for them to do that?
So the great way to do that is go to Steve at Bison Equity Group. Just email me. That'd be perfect. I'm on LinkedIn. You can go to LinkedIn, find me there. Or Bison Equity Group. Just go to our website and we can pick up the book on our website also. And it's on Amazon. We have it in Amazon also. So
we will have all those links in the show notes.
Okay, great.
Steve, thank you for your generosity in sharing so much wisdom today from your journey. And I can't wait to see what you do next.
William, thanks a lot. It's a lot of fun.